Yeah, welcome everyone. So double offering in your feed today. We have Alan Shipnock talking about Rory McIlroy's the new book on Rory McIlroy, head of the Masters. If you're looking for more Masters coverage, Brandel Chambly was published Friday. If, by the way, you listened Friday morning and some of it didn't make sense, the file was corrupted somehow, internet problems, and we deleted it and re-uploaded it to put it in good shape. So that's waiting for you, Brandel. Really, really good, both on Tiger Woods and the week ahead, Masters-wise. So on the golfing front, you're well covered, but this, of course, is very much rugby chat. Champions and Challenge Cup upcoming. So at the weekend just gone, on Easter Sunday, in front of 20,000 at the Aviva, Leinster beat Edinburgh 49 points to 31. They're going to play Sale on Saturday. Sale themselves were at the Stoop. They beat Harlequins away 26-17, the only away win in the round of last 16. Elsewhere, what do we have? Bath beat Saracens by 9 points. The South African sides bowed out, albeit close games. Toulon 28, Stormers 27. And Glasgow beat the Bulls by 4 points on Saturday. And then there were two hammerings. It does happen in round of 16. Toulouse put 59 points on Bristol. Bordeaux put 64 points on Leicester. And beautifully, Toulouse and Bordeaux play on Sunday coming, which is going to just be an epic kind of a game, 3 o'clock. Leinster, by the way, at the Aviva against Sale is 5:30 on Saturday. Bath, Northampton is Friday. And Saturday, 3 o'clock is Glasgow, Toulon. So that's the quarter-final weekend in the Champions Cup. And as you know, I'm sure Leinster on the easier side of the draw. Winners of Leinster Sale will play Glasgow or Toulon in the semi-final. And then Challenge Cup, won't go through that in as much detail, but the headline news, I suppose, from an Irish point of view, Munster 31-0 at half-time, managed 21 points second half, but it was kind of over. Exeter 31, Munster 21. And this very tricky season for Munster starting to spiral a little bit. Ulster and Connacht, meanwhile, victorious. Ulster 28-24 against the Ospreys on Saturday. Bit of controversy towards the end there. TMO decision, we'll come to that. And Connacht 29-12 against the Sharks. 4 tries to none. They were last beaten January 24th, the opening of their new stand against Leinster. They are on a brilliant run of form now. So next round, they're away to Montpellier, Saturday 12:30. That is not easy, albeit Dragons or Zebre await in the semi-final. So, I mean, a real chance of making a final if they can do a number on Montpellier away. And then beautifully as well set up, Ulster, La Rochelle, Friday night. So that's the situation in Europe as it starts to come to the boil, as it tends to do post-Easter. Our rugby coverage, as ever, is with thanks to Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. Grassroots with the AIL. They are official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. And their Rugby for All initiative welcomes everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about Energy's exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. I am conscious as well, Women's Six Nations starts this weekend coming. We will have an interview with Aoife Wafer later in the week to look ahead to the Women's Six Nations. So we've got you covered on all fronts. Happy to say, I feel like it's been months since we've spoken, but Ian Madigan, you're very welcome. How are you?
Thanks a million, Joe. Yeah, delighted to be on. It was an intense weekend of rugby and excited now. I think traditionally the quarterfinal is always the best round, and it's certainly teed up for that this week with the best of French taking each other on, the best of the English, and then in the other two games, the best of the Scottish against Toulon and the best of the Irish against Sale.
Yeah, it's nice. I don't, by the way, listeners, want to cast aspersions on Ian Madigan, the father, but just for context, I did just ask him before coming on, as I would often do, just checking which games did you see, just so I don't, put you on the spot. I don't even mean just Irish games, just which games, and his response was, yeah, all of them. So, shush, I'm watching something here.
Yeah, Montpellier Perpignan was one that slipped the net, but no, I managed to watch it all of them. Now I was lucky that I was in studio on Saturday, so we were able to have two games on at the same time, which was very enjoyable.
Fair enough. Let's start Champions Cup then. Leinster 49, Edinburgh 31. Mad game in many ways. 12 tries in total. Leinster scored 7 and 7 conversions as well from Harry Byrne to Edinburgh's 5. 3 tries last 25 minutes from Van der Fleer and Clarkson, and Yuani put the thing to bed. There was like a surely not moment. A surely not moment on 55 minutes when Darcy Graham goes over, and somehow Edinburgh are 3 points ahead after Leinster had just conceded a raft of very strange tries. And maybe that's where I'll get your initial thoughts, because that's maybe the defining aspect of this game. Leinster didn't do a huge amount of defending for a team that conceded 31 points, but the first concession, a kind of a mix-up between Furlong and Osborne, intercept try. 4 minutes later, Gibson Park, uncharacteristic from him, really bad effort at a tackle kind of midway in Leicester's own half, and that let Ross Thompson in. Then before half-time, Matt Curry snatches a ball en route to Gibson Park, and then when they took the lead, there was a Thompson crossfield kick blocked down by Osborne, and it sits up perfectly for Darcy Graham, and he runs over. So that's an extraordinary sequence of intercept tries.
Yeah, being honest, I was on the floor on 55 minutes. I was doing commentary with Ryle Nugent and John Barkley. Ryle had to pick me back up. It just had that feeling. I was like, is it happening again? Now, I still had confidence that Leinster would be able to close the game out, but they had to strategically change what they were doing, having kind of ran the ball and really moved the ball to width for the first 40 minutes. There was a noticeable change in that second half to really tighten things up, to go more to the air and win those aerial contests, which they did throughout the game. But yeah, on 55 minutes, and you couple that, like Porter had to go off injured. So you'd Usanov making his first cap. I was thinking, if every scrum results in a penalty here, because we haven't seen Usanov, operate in the scrum a whole lot, and it was a good Edinburgh front row. So yeah, I was thinking, could it possibly happen again? But very quickly, Leinster were able to get back on top. It was a very unusual game to have conceded that many soft tries. Like I was going through some of the stats. Like Edinburgh made less than 100 passes in the game, 92 passes, yet they managed to score 31 points. And then you think when you concede 31 points, you must have some real defensive issues. But that isn't the case from this game. Leinster's defence, in particular in that last 30 minutes, was very good. It really shored up. They got off the line really well. They were consistently stopping Edinburgh behind the gain line. But it was actually their attack that was coughing up the ball, in particular in that first half, that was giving those soft tries away that Edinburgh didn't have to work hard for. And that was kind of part of the concern, even at halftime, that for Edinburgh to be in the game is one thing, but to be in the game and still be fresh and having not been beaten up by Leinster certainly gave them hope. And that's why they were able to kind of hang in there, for the next 15, 20 minutes of the second half.
Leo Cullen said afterwards, Edinburgh were going for intercepts. He cited the Rico Yuani try at the end, and he said even there you could see they were going all out for intercepts. How would you, as a team, in your experience, digest that many intercepts in one game? Is that kind of a shrug of the shoulders and look, that was a bit funny, let's not get overly worried, that's unlikely to happen again? Or were there frailties there that you saw which other teams, i.e. Sale at the weekend, might try and take advantage of?
I think it's tied in with a few elements there. You're still working on getting the cohesion back, having the Irish guys being away for the Six Nations. You've played Glasgow Scarlets, finally getting everyone back together for the Edinburgh game. Slightly caught between two systems. There was times when it was nearly looked a little bit telegraphed. The Osborne trying to give the inside ball to Van der Fleer. You could spot that a mile off, and that's where, as a defender, you can hedge your bets and go, well, I can get in the passing channel here, but I can also still make the tackle if I need to. And from an attacking point of view, when you're running through these launch plays, yes, you want to break the opposition down, but you also have to hedge your bets and go, oh, if this pass doesn't go to hand, or, you've got to ensure that it doesn't result in the opposition getting the ball and scoring an easy try. You have to have some sort of insurance in place. And I think there was probably a lackadaisical element from Leinster at the weekend, thinking, look, this is going to be easy. If we run these plays, we should be able to break them down, play on top of them. But once the mistake happened, there was no one there to save it. So that's certainly something that you're going to have to improve as they progress into the competition. But the other side of it, I would look at them and go, these are one-off errors, freaks in a way. yes, you'll still talk about it and you'll discuss it and you say, look, these are little tweaks that we can make to improve. But it's not like systematically there's big issues there. And I don't think to be overly concerned about it.
We'll watch that space. You said you thought Leinster played their best attacking rugby of the season, that looked in good shape. Of the 7 tries, 5 scored by outside backs. That'll give people a sense of almost the ambition to their play. So give us more on the Leinster attack then, because that's not really caught fire all season for various reasons we'll get into in a moment.
No, and I've been critical of the Leinster attack for large parts of the year. And the reason for that is it's just been blunt force, forwards around the corner, hammering the gain line. Quite often it's just one pass, or maybe one pass from the 9 to a forward, or maybe 2 passes through the 10 to a forward, but not really moving the point of contact and getting the ball into the wide channels. I did really notice a change when they played the Scarlets the week before. They were getting the ball out of those shapes and into the wide channels. And you saw the likes of Tommy O'Brien and Joshua Kenny getting on the ball loads against the Scarlets, which was great to see. Now, there was still some mistakes within that, whether it was pass quality or not getting the breakdown right. And that happens when you're having a kind of systematic change to really start moving the ball to width. Who's picking up those rucks is something that you're going to get caught out on. At the weekend, it was progressing again in the right direction. Like, Leinster were getting quick ruck ball. They were playing on top of Edinburgh. The shapes were really sharp. The passing in parts was very good. And then it was also very disappointing in parts when they'd created, genuine 2v1 opportunities, or they were in behind the Edinburgh defence. And that part of it is actually the easier part to execute on. And, you'd a pass from Rico Yuani not going to hand, another one from Porter, one that Ryan Baird just drops cold, and that's where, like, the likes of Porter and Baird, they're only coming back. They've been out of the game for a long time. So they will have got a lot from that game. Their match sharpness will be even better going into Sale. But for me, I was looking at that Leinster attack going, this is the kind of attack that is needed if they want to win this competition. Did I think that they could win the competition with just blunt force and hammering away at the likes of Toulouse, Bordeaux, Bath, Glasgow, even Sale? No. But I'm seeing enough now that if these passes can stick, that attack can break down the top teams in Europe.
Harry Byrne, 7 kicks for 7. So that's self-evident.
And a tough 7. Yeah. It was, yeah.
What about general play?
I was impressed with Harry. He didn't have his best game against the Scarlets the week before, but he hadn't played a whole lot leading into it. He was selected to start against Cardiff, got injured very early in that game, and didn't get a chance for Ireland during the Six Nations. He was solid against the Scarlets. He very much stepped it up against Edinburgh. He was moving the ball really well. His passing is really crisp. It's accurate. He knows his awareness of when to take a few steps out of the ball, or when to have good recognition of the space there. I just need to get this clean through my hands. And then the other side to it that we don't see a whole lot with Harry is his running game. And there was a couple of times at the weekend where he was taking it square to the line and really challenging the Edinburgh opposition, getting his hands free. But the most impressive element of what he did at the weekend was it wasn't going to plan. And Leinster had a clear strategy going into the game. This is how we're going to play. We're going to move the ball to width, keep moving it out of the shapes. They found themselves in an arm wrestle of a game. And obviously the likes of Gibson Park and the coaching team made changes at halftime, which he then executed upon to go just more high percentage, go to the aerial contest, be more patient on when to move the ball. And really, there's a part of it just ensuring that they won the game. At the end of the day, it's a cup match. But had he continued to try and play this expansive game, and it wasn't like it was his errors that was letting the team down. But all it would have taken at 31-28 down, another intercept pass, and then you're 20 minutes to go, 10 points down, a couple of scrum penalties, and that game gets away from you. So very composed from him. He looks someone who's very comfortable in how he's playing the game, and the guys around him, I think, are finding it easier and easier to play off him because that familiarity is there.
Rico Yuani, worth a mention, generally criticised this season, hasn't settled in or done as well as Barrett did the year before, but with his 60 minutes, give or take, outside centre and finished up in the wing, assisted 2 tries, scored a nice try at the end. That was almost the kind of maybe beginnings of him doing what he can do in a Leinster jersey.
Yeah, I know it was interesting that of the two halves, the second half was definitely the better of his performances. I've touched on that 2v1 that he'd be disappointed with, but something that's easily corrected. There was another pass that he threw to Tyke Furlong, bit wobbly, but that resulted in a try for Edinburgh. But then he built his way into the game, took his try really well, had some nice passages of play where he's kind of releasing the outside backs. His handling is an underrated part of his game. He carries really aggressively. I think he's getting more comfortable in that Leinster defensive system. That's not really how he would have defended at the Blues or with the All Blacks. He spoke very effusively of Nian Aber after the game and saying how much he's enjoying working with them. It was good to see the Leinster players getting in and celebrating with them. You know, it's a sign that he's probably liked within the squad. But yeah, look, as you said, I don't think he's been playing overly poorly, but we just haven't seen these big performances that we saw from the likes of Barrett last year. He does do a lot of unseen work. Like, might sound like a small thing, but earlier in the year in wet conditions, he was always leading Leinster's kick chase. You know, he got that important block down against La Rochelle. He was getting through a lot of like bog standard carries, bog standard tackles. But like from a stats point of view, as you'd expect from a world-class player like himself, he's top of the charts within those stats. But then it's the more open play that we would have seen from the likes of Barrett last year, unlocking defenses, running over someone, beating someone one-on-one, absolutely whacking someone in a tackle. You know, Barrett had it all, but he's probably one of the best backs in the world. Oh, yeah. Not that Yuani's not, but like Barrett's on a different level again. You know?
He was on a different level, not least this exact time last year, you know.
Yeah, I think
sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, just the other point. I think someone else made this, was possibly Byrne Jackman, but it was also the team that Barrett was coming into. It was very settled. You didn't have any lines disruption. The team was playing really well. It was much easier to fit in. Whereas this year, you know, they've changed things a lot. You've the Lions tour. The team isn't playing amazingly well. It's harder to fit in.
That's a great point. No, it's a fair point. Yeah. So this has been such a strange season. Where are Leinster? Like last year, there was a sense going into Northampton game, you know, ironically, that they were in great shape. They were nailing prem opposition and scoring 50, 60 points. And Barrett was on fire and the whole thing looked to be in great shape and obviously came undone horribly against Northampton. This, more than most Leinster seasons, because they generally do come down to 1 or 2 games. That's how we judge a Leinster season. But it feels so exacerbated this year because and it's a strange thing to say, I honestly class Sunday as like their season starting. The logic being they were obliterated by the Lions for obvious reasons. Players couldn't come back, couldn't play. You know, that Munster game at Croke Park, Munster had a much stronger selection. Then November happens, the November internationals. Then it's December and January. The weather is appalling. I vividly remember Leo Cullen interview on Premier Sports with you guys after they beat Munster at Thorne Park. And, you know, he was acknowledging the attack isn't very good. We're not flowing. We don't have much continuity. We're not playing the same team very often. There was a degree of this is all hands on deck. We're just trying to win ugly and just get through this part of the season. And I thought that tallied. Then Six Nations happens. And now suddenly here they are. And so more than almost any other season, I've no real... There's almost like very little tape or games to point to where you would say, give you a real feel for where they are. Like really interesting, you're noticing this quantum leap in their attack just in the last 2 games. Like in the last 2 games, and we're in April. So your sense of this strange season and where they are.
And it's very hard to say where they are. But it's been interesting listening to Leo over the last few weeks. He said they are exactly where they want to be from a positional standpoint, but not from a performance standpoint. And what he's saying there is we've got a home run through the last 16 in the quarterfinal. The URC destiny is largely in their own hands, that they can probably still get top 2, if not top 3. They have a good run in the league. But he'll have known performance-wise that they haven't reached the heights that they did last year when they were just obliterating teams. You think of obviously the Quins and Glasgow one in particular around this time of year. The likes of Bayonne, La Rochelle, Leicester, we haven't seen that convincing performance from Leinster. I thought it was going to come at the weekend, and it was interesting hearing the likes of Rob Carney and Andy Good speaking beforehand. They were all predicting, 40, 50, 60-point win for Leinster, and it didn't happen again. Leo said, not overly concerned about the performance. It's most important. It's a cup match. It's about getting a win. I wouldn't fully believe that. He was looking for a big performance at the weekend. That team was dialed up, and it didn't quite come. But look, they're through to the next round. The squad health is generally very good. Obviously, the issue at Loosehead is continuing with Paddy McCarthy. Porter needs to come back in, and that's obviously compounded with Boyle's long-term injury. So Andrew Porter is very important that he's fit if Leinster are going to challenge for that 5th star. But I look at the opposition and the contenders within the Champions Cup. For me, the clear best 2 sides are Bordeaux and Toulouse. And Leinster obviously have to beat Sale and probably Glasgow to make the final. But do I think that they have the game to beat Toulouse or Bordeaux? And I genuinely believe that they do. And the reason for that is their defence. Their defence and how hard they get off the line has the ability to ruffle the feathers of the Bordeaux and Toulouse attack, force them to make errors. And then I'm beginning to see the Leinster attack flourishing enough that they're a team now that can score points. Now, it's in a different way to how Toulouse and Bordeaux do it, where they're heavily reliant on speed and keeping the ball alive. That's not really Leinster's style of play. It's more about breaking teams down. But they are 100% contenders this year. It's going to be tough, but they can still do it in my view.
Yeah. The defence thing is very interesting because obviously it's a big part of what Jack Nienaber brings to the equation. And they had defended so appallingly last year against Northampton, you almost couldn't read too much into it. It wasn't like necessarily a system situation. It was just a complete capitulation on many fronts. So we haven't seen it against a Toulouse or a Bordeaux. Luke Fitzgerald, talking to Will often say he's really concerned about this defence. He thinks it's going to catch them out, Leinster. He thinks they're going to be cut to ribbons out wide badly at some stage.
And it can. That's the thing with it. It is high risk. And it's far from perfect. And I'm not saying that it is. But it also has the ability on its day when it clicks to beat anyone.
Yeah. Can I throw something at you? Because I was going to ask you this anyway. I mean, you talked about them coming up hard the last 20, 25 minutes and shutting the game out. I have to say, and again, the sample sizes here this season of all seasons are small, but watching a good chunk of the Edinburgh game, I think the Bayonne game in particular, where it was a wet day and it was custom made for a team to squeeze up on the opposition if that was the type of defence they would like. I don't feel Leinster are rushing up with the same velocity or ferocity of year one under Nienaber. I do feel it's far more they're coming up in a line and not quite paddling or stop, but it's not like this wild kind of thing and getting in amongst it. I know there were a few, like Ringrose against Bayonne, that midfield play, he shot up too much, but that was an individual choice more than anything. But I don't know, I definitely, for all that we talk about Leinster's defence shooting up, I don't turn on the TV and if it was in black and white and I didn't know the teams, I don't find myself going, oh whoa, that Leinster one's like nothing else out there. They are just shooting up like crazy. I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, I think the change has been twofold. I think if you do the same thing over and over again, an attack is going to pick you off. And even this week with someone like George Ford, who has a good crossfield kick, good passing variety, they'll be backing themselves to get outside that Leinster rush defence. And they will on occasions, but Leinster will also back their scramble to save it and it won't result in a try. The improvements that Leinster have made are that you've touched on it. They're not just going every time. They're a bit more selective on when they are deciding to go really hard off the line. And then there's other occasions where they're just staying connected. They're filling the field better than what they were. They were getting too close, too tight around the breakdown, which was making that rush defense too tight. And then the other area tied into your point, like Jack will be going through that game at Edinburgh against Edinburgh and saying to guys, in this instance, you've got to go harder. You're not going hard enough. This was a good opportunity to get up, get in their face, get in the passing channel, force them back inside. And that is back to the kind of conversation that we were having around Ireland in the Six Nations. A lot of these players have been running with a different system, and now they're adapting back to the Leinster system. The Irish one is more about staying connected.
And in your heart of hearts, when you watch these players, and maybe we're seeing a slight reluctance at times to rush up because they've had the Six Nations experience, do you feel the Irish players prefer a slightly more cautious line speed to what Jacques wants them to do, or because they always talk effusively about him, and even on the record, off the record, they love what he's bringing to the party, and yet sometimes there is a suspicion that they're not as comfortable as, for instance, South African counterparts in rushing up the way he might want them to.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the belief there in the players. The way they talk about their defence, they're so passionate about it, and they believe that it can be the secret weapon that's going to win them the Champions Cup. But from an Irish perspective, historically, we are more a controlling defensive team. You think back to Declan Kidney, Joe Schmidt. Joe in particular was more about staying connected. Now the game was slightly different, where he was happy for the opposition to go really high into the phase count. If we were giving up a couple of meters here and there, so be it. If you trap them on the touchline, that was the time to go hard. But it was generally a more passive, significantly more passive than South Africa's style of defence. So the belief is definitely there. Club rugby and international rugby is different, but they're totally bought in on Jack's system, and I do still think, while it's got its flaws, I do still think it can be their point of difference.
Yeah, so interesting over the next couple of weeks. Quick word on Sale. Very deserved winners against Harlequins 26-17. I read a few match reports from journalists there, and one line said, low quality match, pockmarked by errors. They're looking to make the first semi-final in their history. Sale. George Ford, by all accounts, a classic knockout rugby performance, but they have injuries. They're without both Curry brothers, which is a major blow. Rumours one of them may be back for Saturday, but officially without both Curry brothers, Tom and Ben. Luke Cowan-Dickey left the game on Saturday with his arm in a sling. And I see their hooker as well has been cited for biting Will Hobson. Nathan Jabulu has been cited for allegedly biting Will Hobson. He's going to have a disciplinary hearing this week. So, and they're out of kind of contention in the Prem. So a lot of their season boils down to this game. Meanwhile, Leinster, RG Simon, a loss, of course, but are welcoming back the likes of James Ryan and Gary Ringrose. So the general health there is good. I have not seen anybody give Sale much of a chance here.
No, and those injuries, for me, kind of bottom out them having any sort of chance. Look, there's always a
chance, yeah.
But I don't see it. Like, it was the same. Now they're better than Edinburgh, considerably better. But even with all that went Edinburgh's way, they still couldn't find a way to win. Do I see Leinster slipping up this weekend? No, I think this could be the week that it starts to really click for them. They'll know that they were close, tweak a couple of things in attack and defence, and they'll be going into this game with real confidence and that the cohesion that hasn't quite been there in previous weeks.
Okay, very good. That's Saturday afternoon at the Aviva Stadium. Short break, back for more with Ian Madigan. Okay, Ian, let's talk Challenge Cup. We have to start with Munster. It was even strange, 12:30 on Saturday, watching the pre-game and watching the teams come out of the tunnel. You've Exeter, who are, champions in 2020, Champions Cup, Champions 2020, and Munster, who you just don't feel belong in the tournament. It didn't feel like a Challenge Cup game as they were walking out, but of course it was. And for Munster, there is the ignominy of being dumped out 31 points to 21. It was 31-0 at half time. The win was incredible. Like, if anyone didn't see the game, you do have to emphasise that. At one point, Stephen Varney box kicked from his own half and the ball boomeranged back to Stephen Varney and he hadn't moved from the spot. So it was that kind of occasion. Munster made the decision to play against the wind first half. First off, how'd you like that decision?
I don't like it. I flagged last week when I was on with Will. Look, first off, Exeter aside on the way up, and Munster aren't. They've been in a steady decline over the last few seasons. The 12:30 kickoff away from home is a tricky one. I've seen away sides get caught with that so often, where the home team can run into a 10, 14 point lead really quickly. Playing with the wind would definitely have helped that. And I think Munster in cup games are traditionally really good, but you got to be in it to win it, and they weren't. That game was over at half time. I know they've given themselves a glimmer of a chance at the end of the game to kind of score and potentially score again. But I was disappointed with how Munster managed the conditions. You think back to like the Munster of old and how they capitalize on the opposition mistakes, how so often you would see in Thomond in tough conditions that they can do the rope-a-dope, absorb a huge amount of pressure. The opposition makes a mistake, Munster hack the ball clear, and then they have this like unbelievable kick chase, and then it's turn and trap, another mistake, and you've flipped the field. We just didn't see that. It was like a kind of naivety from Munster. Even you look at like a couple of those intercepts where they're trying to play the long side, they're trying to run into the open side, into the wind. It's really difficult to do that.
Yeah, because actually I want to ask you about that on commentary quite a lot. They kept saying, "Oh, Munster needed to play the short side here." So going short side against the wind is the way to do it traditionally.
Yeah, well, it's the easiest way to keep the gain line, first off, and it's also it's nothing as tiring, because you're utilizing the same players in a short space. The passing distance is far shorter, which is obviously really important in the wind because the ball kind of buffets about, which when you're trying to catch a ball and there's a defender waiting for you, that's the last thing you need. You're going to get dominantly hit as opposed to perfect conditions where you can get a late movement and slip a tackle, or it's a soft shoulder. That's the difference between quick ruck ball, slow ruck ball. But also like for personnel, like Casey runs a short side attack really well. And it also suits the centers where like they're not the biggest of guys. Like it can be easier for them to just get up from the wide ruck, realign on the short side, and you just kind of stay on top of the opposition, and then you can just regenerate, organize a box kick. You have a much more solid line as opposed to playing width to width and the pitch kind of opening up. And then most importantly, when you're playing into the wind, is what's your backfield cover like? And full credit to Munster, they actually utilised the wind really well in the second half. A couple of brilliant 50-22s from Casey and Crowley. But they just made it way too easy for Exeter to score. Like, Exeter made 79 passes in the game, yet scored 31 points. Munster made 240. Possession was, a third to 2/3 in Munster's favour. Territory was very similar. Exeter made double the amount of tackles. So like you're looking at these stats going, how were they so far behind? It was because they were just coughing the ball up too easily. Like Exeter didn't have to work too hard for their scores, apart from like the one good defensive set that Munster put together at the start of the game. Once the gates opened, the floodgates opened, and it was all too easy for Exeter.
Yeah. I know, because that first defensive set made me think, oh, there's still a bit of magic here. It was camped in their 22 for a good 5 minutes. The crowd were up, and Byrne, inevitably, is the man who gets hands on the ball. And I thought, they still have it in them. This time last year it was La Rochelle. Here they go. And that would have been such a confidence booster. That would have been such a settler for them. And then it's, disastrous. It's the intercept tries. There's bad defending. I know... Faye Boso is obviously a great player, but I mean, like there was bad defending in there as well, and then they're just coughing up the ball, maybe playing too ambitiously, as you say, managing the conditions badly, and then picking to play into the wind in the first half. So it's a disastrous kind of first half, and I would say as well, just because of the general mood around the club and the players acknowledging their sympathies for those who may be subject to redundancies. You really wanted like a big emotional Munster performance, almost to say like there are certain baseline standards here, and actually it's like a team, and I suppose an organisation which is just wilting. That's what's so worrying here. This thing could really spiral now.
Yeah, and you think back to their best game of the season against Leinster. There was an identity there, and their defense, it was back to what I said, unbelievable defense, capitalizing on the opposition errors, but then also like really good, efficient attacking play. What's Munster's identity at the moment? What's their style of play in attack and defense? They've fallen into the trap of trying to do a little bit of everything, but not doing anything in particularly well.
Right.
And for this stage of the season, you compare that, without jumping the gun and speaking about Connacht, like there's a clear identity with Connacht now. I know exactly what they're doing, both attacking wise and defensive wise. They look really comfortable as a team. They know on this area of the pitch, this is what we do when we're defending. This is what we do. Attack, I know where I'm going. And I know if this happens, this is what the team's going to do next. And quite often you can kind of get there at this time of the season. It's harder to arrive in that state when you've been losing games. And to think that Munster have only won, I think it's 4 games since that win against Leinster. And, you know, the players afterwards were talking about, look, there's still a trophy to win with the URC. And they went on that amazing run a few years ago. Obviously, they beat Leinster in the semi-final and then the Stormers in the final. They're so far off doing that this year. And like the focus for them has to be winning 2 of their last 4 games. And none of them are gimmies. You know, they've got to go to Connacht in the Dexicom. Ulster, full of confidence, will be going to down to Munster. And then they've Lions, which is one that I'd be very confident that they'd win. But Lions are playing well. And then you've Benetton away.
Yeah.
You know, so that is they're all 4 tricky fixtures. Now, I think Munster could win all 4 of them and potentially go on a run. They have it in them, but they're so far off doing that. How Munster are playing this year versus when they won the league a few years ago, it's chalk and cheese.
That's a very interesting point you make about the lack of identity, that you don't really know what you're getting from them in defence. You don't know what you're getting from them in attack. There's almost a lack of clarity. But that feeds into, and they're just rumours. I haven't heard anything, but people certainly are looking at Mike Prendergast leaving at the end of the season, and they're putting 2 and 2 together, and they're just wondering, like, how unified is this coaching ticket, which has been sort of cobbled together.
Yeah, and then like there's like the foundational elements of the game, like that nearly every team will run the same system. You know, 1-3-3-1. So you know, back row holding the edge, a pod of 3 forwards that usually play off 9, a pod of 3 forwards that are waiting to play off 10. You've a centre sitting in behind those pods or an out half, and then you're then building the variation of your game off that, right? And look, there's lots of other variations, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible for our listeners, but it's just imperative that you do the basics of that shape really, really well. And then you can grow your game off the back of it. Munster aren't doing that well enough for me. There's too many errors within it, whether it's pass accuracy, whether it's timing, whether it's missing breakdowns. And it was the same last week against the Bulls. If you're a team that's getting turned over in attack off line out ball or scrum ball on the first or second phase, that is a huge, huge issue, because that's stuff that's worked on every week in training. Who is at this ruck? Who is at that ruck?
So that's a red flag, and you can extrapolate a lot from that.
Yeah, and part of that is when you're in a losing environment, there's a lot said every week, and everything is the most important thing, and suddenly not scraping your plates properly is the reason we're losing, among 100 other things. But it can be hard to focus on what is the most important thing versus where Leinster are at, where they're going, right, there's probably 3 key messages that are coming from the coaching team this week. And the guys in their notebooks pre-game will all have those 2 or 3 points. Whereas if you were to open up the notebooks of the Munster players, there's probably variation of 10, 15 points of all different stuff that they're all trying to focus on. And you can see that frustration in Crowley. Like Crowley's single-handedly tried to carry them to a win and played really well again.
Brilliant.
But even at the end, you can see how frustrated he is. You know, come on, guys, bit of urgency. And yeah, I feel for him. You could also sense Tig's frustration post-game. You know, I think he said, if you want to have a good example of how to shoot yourself in the foot, have a look at that first half, and he's not wrong.
Yeah, okay. Worrying times. Like, Irish rugby needs a strong Munster. 7th in URC, and as you said, Benetton away, Ulster home, Connacht away, Lions to not just, you know, give themselves European rugby next season, not just have a run in the URC, but also the finances are at play, you know, and it becomes a trickier thing then in the summertime for them to recruit players if they're not in Champions Cup, or if they've had an obliteration of a season, or if just financially there's instability. Are you really going to choose going there if you just don't like the smell around the place and there's other options?
It's really tricky. Like, even I'm not sure if it's been announced or if it's a rumor, but with Abraham's leaving, like he has played really well at times.
Yeah.
Is he going to be replaced? But I mentioned on the show last week, like knockout games over the last 5 years, home knockout games, because that's where you make your money. If you're playing them away from home, you get a fraction of the gate. And the sponsorship money is nothing as good, nor is the TV money. But home, last 16 quarterfinal, home quarterfinal, semi-final of the URC are where it's at. Over the last 5 years, Leinster have had 22 home in Europe and across the URC. Munster have had 4, Ulster have had 3, and Connacht have had 1. And if you were to put a number on that, now there's variance because different competitions will take a different percentage of the gate at different times of the year. But a full Aviva in a quarterfinal stage of the Champions Cup, you're talking big numbers. It could be 7 figures, right? On average, I'd say conservatively 400 or 500K a game, right? So that's north of 10 million versus 1.5 or 2 million over a 5-year period. And that is really stinging. And it's just been a steady decline. Death by 1,000 cuts in a way. You just hope that they find a way to bounce back over these next 4 games.
Yeah, I know. It did cross my mind over the weekend. God, that decision at the end of the Toulon game really setting things in motion in a certain direction as well. They played very well that day, and it could have been a different scenario. Connacht are the feel-good story. They've kind of nudged Ulster out of the way to become the feel-good story in Irish rugby. 29-12 against Sharks on Friday night at the Dexcom. Ebenezabeth back for the Sharks. Tries from Mullins, Kyle Ford with 2, Hurley Langton with the other, all in the second half. Or sorry, 1 in the first half, excuse me, and then 3 in the second half. Kind of an interesting game in that Sharks applied scoreboard pressure and went 6-0 up, and Munster scored try, or Connacht scored try. But then they're 5 points down at half time, again just to the boot of the Sharks, taking their points, but really come good in the second half and scored the three tries. Gives your view on the game for sure. But the last time we kind of went in depth in Connacht, you made really interesting observation. I'm going to bluntly sum it up, which is that you felt, and it's the Lancaster way, a lot of phases, and by the time they could get to the 22, their conversion rate might not be brilliant, owing just simply to fatigue. And then obviously that would compound across a game. They mightn't be finishing games as strongly as they could, owing to fatigue. So playing a lot of rugby in an era where there's a lot more kicking and teams are maybe playing slightly less rugby. So curious on this winning run now to get your sense of what they're doing differently, if anything.
No, they are. They're much more efficient. I was critical because I felt like they were overplaying. They were playing really high into the phase count, but not getting any scores on the board. This is earlier in the season. And it came to a head when they played Leinster in the Aviva, and that was the low point of their season, where they were all the effort, but nothing really to show for it. And then Leinster were attacking against a fatigued Connacht side. And they did have an injury-struck squad at that time as well, and they certainly don't have the depth that the likes of Leinster would have. But you contrast that to now, where their attack is just much more efficient. It's way more powerful. It's impactful. How they're utilising the short side when they get the ball to a 20-metre ruck or a midfield ruck, their double-sided attack is excellent because they're fit. They're getting off the ground really quickly. The little mini communication and realignment is there. So the halfbacks have always got options both sides of the ruck. And it's something that Glasgow are probably the best side in Europe at doing. That's their style of play. But with Lancaster, you're now getting this compounding effect where he pushes the guys really hard. We all know about, Tuesdays and how tough they are. But it's also the micro coaching every day, every week, every month. And now we're getting towards the end of the season and we're seeing that come to fruition, where the little tweaks here and there, where players now know what to do in certain situations, is coming good. And defensively, they're looking much better as well. Like it's the combination of slowing the opposition ruck ball down, which they weren't doing. They get off the line hard in a cohesive fashion. If you have to break that Connacht defence down, you have to do it with some really good play.
Wow. First time we've said that in a long time.
Yeah, but like even the Sharks didn't score a point at the weekend. It was tough conditions. They didn't score a point. I can't remember them having a line break either. And there's plenty of powerful guys in that Sharks team that can get offloads away. There's more than one way to get a line break. The one area that I would still be critical with Connacht, and if they're going to go on and win this week in I think it's Montpellier that they're playing.
Yeah.
The aerial contest is still a work on for them, and the Sharks got great pay out of that.
Dealing with it or off their own kicks?
Both. It's just such a big part of the game now with how the escorting laws have gone. It's not only getting up and winning balls that are kicked to you or winning balls that you're kicking to the opposition. It's also how you're winning the scraps on the ground. As a team, how quickly you're getting realigned when you win the ball, so you're making the most of that attacking opportunity, and how quickly you're resetting defensively when you don't win them.
Yeah.
Because they're those unstructured opportunities that so many teams crave. And that is still a big work on for them. But there's so many positives to talk about within that team now.
Well, the way you're describing it, it just seems like this is a kind of stunning coaching performance on Lancaster's part in his first season, and the way you've said those micro coaching moments kind of compound, give that another season or two. So Montpellier away on Saturday, if they can get over that, then it's Dragons or Zebre in a semi-final, which they'll really fancy, and suddenly it's a final. So Montpellier away, what kind of challenge are they? Like Connacht very much going as underdogs here?
They have to be. Yeah, like if you're looking at budgets, Montpellier comfortably, I'd say 3, if not 4 times the budget of Connacht. They're coming, I think, 3rd in the top 14. They haven't lost many home games. They're very, very good at home. They offer something different to what Connacht will play week in, week out in the URC. They're a powerful team. There's real speed in that back line. I haven't seen loads of them. Watching the top 14 is a little bit harder this year.
Come on, Mads. You only watched 45 games this weekend. If you're going to come on the show, you got to watch rugby, in fairness, man.
But look, they were very comprehensive against Perpignan, even just looking at the result.
Yeah.
But Connacht played them earlier in the season and ran them really close. Like they were right in that game, I think, till about 65 minutes, and then it just crept away from them. But Connacht will be looking at that going, we are way better than when we played them earlier in the season.
Yes.
And Montpellier, might underrate Connacht a little bit. And yeah, I'd be sneakily confident that Connacht can get a result there.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. It's worth watching. Allied to as well, just the confidence that comes from, God, I can't remember the last time we were beaten. January 24th is a million years ago. They must just feel so good at the moment. And that belief they'll have in Lancaster will be incredible. Let's finish on Ulster then, who play La Rochelle on Friday. To be fair, like the European rugby, when it comes alive, it really comes alive. So there's just great games everywhere. Ulster, they beat Ospreys 28-24 on Saturday. If people didn't see the game, this was keenly contested back and forth. It did feel around the 55th minute when Nick Timoney made what is now becoming a kind of very familiar, powerful burst with the ball and scored a try, that Ulster were in control. But to their credit, Ospreys came back and were within 4 points. And with 3 minutes to go, Ospreys scored a try, which I think to most people's eyes looked like a try, the referee included. And then the TMO intervened and cited a potential forward pass offload, the last kind of pass before the try was scored. And they had a good look at it, and it was given as a forward pass, and Ulster could not get the ball off the pitch quickly enough. Like, I saw Owen Doyle in the Times kind of railing against the interventions of TMOs, like emphasising it's supposed to be for very much the clear and obvious. And he felt this forward pass is not that clear and that obvious that the TMO needs to get involved there. And it's a separate point, but he talked about just generally like in the Connacht game, the TMO is just almost like on a kind of monologue, just doesn't stop talking, like taking the referee through every decision almost, which, and he says, is not the point of it. And referees are kind of it's a nice safety net to have, so maybe they're reliant on it. But yeah, that's the summary of the game. I'll get your thoughts on Ulster in a sec, but just that TMO intervention, was that okay? Like, was there enough forward in it that the TMO could argue, well, I think it's forward, I think it's clear and obvious, I'm coming in?
I think it's difficult for the referees when the TMO comes in and the referee then decides to go, I'm not agreeing with you here. You do see it the odd time, but you're effectively saying, I think you're wrong. So you've come in, you've interrupted the game, but you're wrong. Yeah. So
It's the same in Premier League as well. The frequency of a referee running over to the camera, having been told by other people, "We think you got this wrong. Come and look at it yourself." It's just human nature. It's human psychology that do I go against? God, does everyone think what the VAR person thinks, that I've got this wrong? Really rare referee will overturn will go against the VAR.
Very rare. What's also unusual is usually when the commentators are there, you'll quite often have one from one team and another from the opposition. And it was Stephen Ferris and Shanklin doing, and they were both in agreement that they didn't think it was forward. There's a quirk in the laws of rugby where a pass can move forward in reference to the pitch, but if it's deemed to have gone backwards out of the hand, now this was a more popping up of an offload versus, let's say, Menoncello's pass against Ireland in the Six Nations, where you're talking about the ball leaving the hands going backwards, but momentum propelling the ball forward.
I thought forward. I just thought forward. I don't think it went back out of the hand at all.
From in the Ospreys game? Yeah, I think it is forward, but there's plenty of referees that will let that go and just go, it's not clear enough for me. But no, I did think it both left the hands forward and went forward. But Ulster were very, very lucky. Just to finish out on that point, from a commentating point of view, it would make my job a lot easier if that law was changed and it was changed to, look, if the ball goes forward in reference to the pitch, it's a forward pass. I just think that it just makes it more black and white. Now, does that make it slightly harder for the attacking team? Yes, it does, because of the likes of that Menoncello pass. If it wasn't called forward, you've got to realign as a winger. But as an attacking player, you just got to know that if you're going at full speed, you got to heave that ball backwards. And if you're the supporting player, you got to hold your feet. And players are smart; they'll adapt to it very quickly. But from time to time, and the way rugby's gone, like these laws were written, 100 years ago. Maybe we might need to tweak that one, as we have done with many other ones. But that's just a kind of personal.
It's interesting
to make it a little bit easier. But yeah, look, I think with that Ulster game, don't give a sucker a chance. And full credit to all the Welsh sides; they've been so competitive with so much uncertainty laying in front of them with next season on how many teams there'll still be. Are you still going to be professional? Do you need to find another club? If anything's brought them together, and it's been really impressive. You look at the Dragons beating Stade Francais at the weekend and progressing through, and they've been really competitive in all their URC games. The Ospreys are like that. They will hang around in games to give themselves an opportunity to score. Ulster had plenty of opportunities to put that game to bed. As you touched on, they were with the wind with kind of 15, 20 minutes to go. But the Ospreys just hung around, and that had a really horrible feeling as Ulster supported by the end of it.
La Rochelle's tasty then.
Yeah, La Rochelle, and La Rochelle rotated heavily for the game against Newcastle. They have a serious injury crisis. They've their talisman and Will Skelton. He's unfortunately out for the rest of the season. Obviously, Antonio with his illness. There's a long list of injured players there. So Ulster will be fancying their chances there, but they'll probably need their best performance of the year to beat them.
Yeah. Before you go, Bordeaux Toulouse just jumps off the page this Sunday at 3:00. Double check who's at home. I think it's
Bordeaux are at home.
Bordeaux's at home. Is this going to be as glorious as I think it's going to be?
Yeah. I think this is going to be has the potential to be the greatest game of all time. It's fascinating. I think people think they're very similar on how they play. There is some contrasting elements. Toulouse's defense, like they're staying connected much more as opposed to like the Leinster hard press. They want teams to have to go through 10, 15 phases to break them down. You've got to work really hard to break that Toulouse defense down. Whereas Bordeaux, in both the top 14 and the Champions Cup, they're comfortable with the opposition having the ball and them tiring themselves out. They're very selective on when they choose to go for a poach at the breakdown, or the opposition coughs up a turnover, and then they just come to life. Noah McNamara, good Irish coach, obviously running their defence, how they move the ball to their fast guys. And then within that, they just don't give the opposition much of a chance to get it back when you're in a phase of play, because they keep the ball alive so well. Both teams do that. The laws have trended towards that style of play, whereas, having the ball on the ground, it's easier to turn the ball over. But having a good offloading game and then that giving you opportunities to attack against unstructured defense suits both of these sides, and that is why they are whoever wins that game will be favorites to go on and win it. I think it's fascinating. If I was to put my money where my mouth is, I think Toulouse will win that one. I just think they've enough power up front to kind of slow Bordeaux down. And then the halfback pairing, Dupont is the key guy. Entamac looked very good at the weekend. Their centres, they'd have a slight edge. Like Van Rensburg went off injured for Bordeaux. He's a loss, just that depth. Whereas like Toulouse have 4 unbelievable centres that they can pick from. But yeah, what a contest that's going to be.
Yeah, to be enjoyed. So all these games in Premier, I presume. You're at the Aviva, I would guess, for Leinster Sale, or are you elsewhere?
Yeah, at the Aviva for that one. So
nice.
Looking forward to it. It was crazy weekend for Premier. 11 games they had to cover, and full credit to them. I thought
the coverage has been really good. Genuinely, the coverage has been really good. I'd have to say it. Okay. Super stuff, dude. As ever, it's like a PhD in rugby every week with you, so appreciate that, and we'll catch up in the next week or so.